This is another good article, and it's along the lines of what we preach here on RBN. We're post-duopoly. We're the post-duopoly left. That's who we are. That's who we want to represent, because we believe the post-duopoly left is all of the proletariat. And here it goes. Post-duopoly left, PDL. We are PDLs. Post-duopoly left. Let's dig into this story, the need for independent left leadership. This is an article from the Black Agenda Report. This one is by SUDIP, Subdip, Bhattacharya. All right, I'll just try it once. But I tried to blow it up so you can see the name, just in case, since I obviously not pronouncing it correctly. So let's get into this article. Leftists in the United States must forge independent formations. Electoral politics are still a dead end. Already starting out spot on. In March, it was reported that the Biden administration is planning. Oh, I guess I got to make it smaller so that doesn't cover that word. Is planning a Trump era measure on immigration detention policy along the U.S. Mexico border. So you vote for FDR and somehow you get Trump again when you vote for Joe Biden, right? Is that how it works? You thought you were voting for FDR in the voting booth, and somehow Trump is delivered to the White House. And I'll repeat, in March, it was reported that Biden administration is planning to reintroduce a Trump-era measure on immigration detention policy along the U.S.-Mexico border. This policy would mean the detainment of families crossing the border in overcrowded ICE detention facilities rather than the current policy of allowing them to wait for their asylum trial while staying with their family and friends, or in some other cases, abate fearing a monitor. Quote, children should be released from ICE detention centers with their parents immediately, Biden had said when condemning the same hideous policy when it had been introduced by the explicitly racist Trump administration. And it's the same, I'll stop here. Same thing we say about all the progressives. It's the same ICE detention center, the same kids, the same families that are being detained, but somehow it's different. Somehow it's not the same. Let's continue with the article. Somehow now it's okay to traumatize migrants fleeing from countries ruined by far-right regimes our politicians have often propped up, not to mention escaping from ruinous neoliberal policies that have spread to all corners of the globe. If this were to go through, this would be yet another broken promise by Biden and his accolades inside the White House. Acolytes, I should say. From increasing funding for the police to ending a possible strike among railway workers desperate for a day off, the Biden administration has been a laundry list of failed stances on policies that have been proven that have improved the living and working that would have improved the living and working conditions of many of his alleged constituents. Quote, election seasons are reality creation festivals during which the two corporate parties pretend to put forward different visions of the national and global destiny. End quote. The imitable Glenn Ford once wrote, quote, when in fact they answer to the same master and must pursue the same general strategy, end quote. And it also speaks to what I always say, which is, do you think Amazon has a different corporate strategy if a Republican is there than a Democrat? Don't you think they have the same money at all cost strategy? So it doesn't matter. That's why they donate to both parties. Grace Dean at Bloomberg writes, quote, the financial services sector gave 982 million in party coded contributions according to 2019 and 2020 through both individual employee donations and PACs, the report states. Of this, 47% went to Republicans and 53% went to Democrats. I would say that's pretty even. The GOP is the blunder interpretation of capitalist greed and ID. It is a party of white nationalists and nihilism to a degree, a party of crass businessmen and white resentment that had been allowed to fester since Reagan's rise to political infamy. That said, the Democratic Party leadership itself, among with Biden, who has a long, illustrious career of being conservative, pro-segregation type, are beholden to financial and other business interests. Because of such interests and their support for party top-tier progressive policies on labor, on empire, on issues surrounding migration and reproductive rights, will never come about, let alone see the light of day when it comes to some reforms in Congress, the so-called House of People. And here is the quote I read earlier, I believe. Yes. Massive changes in government policy won't happen so long as the US left works within the party system. I'll pause there because now we're getting into the first part, kind of sets the foundation, because you have to say, why is that you have to illustrate why the Democrats are so terrible and not really an option as to come to this point that they're making here. I don't know how to make this other part go away. But okay, I guess this is as close as I can get. I'll try to guess what it says behind the covering there, but let's read. Because now here is where it kind of gets into the meat and potatoes of the conversation. Massive changes to government policy won't happen so long as the U.S. left works within the the party system. And that is what RBN has been saying, and that's what we're still saying. And that's the reason why we're forging partnerships and forging alliances, not partnerships, but forming alliances and coalitions with the likes of Worker Strike Back and Shama Sawant. Thus allowing the masses to do the same. Voting in candidates, all the while private enterprise and industry amassing more and more power for itself. So, yeah, you're voting in progressive Democrats, but by voting in a number of progressive Democrats, you're adding to their bench, you're adding to their roster. That's just giving power to the people at the top of that roster who aren't progressive, who are warmongers, who are marching us to a nuclear Armageddon. So it is actually self-defeating to do that. So instead, if the left is serious about improving the lives of the masses, especially Black and brown, and here is where I believe why this is not the centerpiece, why clinging to the Democratic Party is still part of the left narrative, is because where was I? Because if you are serious about improving the lives of the masses, if you are serious especially for those black and brown, if you are serious about that, you wouldn't be a part of the Democratic Party, which to me is correct because we always say the professional managerial class, the Bernie Sanders industrial complex, all these rich left white motherfuckers, they're not out for our best interests. The Kyle Kalinskis, the Crystal Balls, the Emma Viglins, the Sam Cedars, they're not out for our best interest. They're out for their best interest. So teaming up with the Democratic Party is still feasible. It's still a good plan because getting or how do they phrase it here? Improving the lives of the masses is not their number one priority. There is no other avenue towards that end apart from disrupting the daily churn of major corporations and businesses and those government agencies that prioritize their interests. Let's read this quote here. Quote, the best way to counter the political power of those institutions is to disrupt their profits or their functioning, writes Kevin Young, to run Levers of Power. I'm sorry, they wrote Levers of Power, How the 1% Rules and What the 99% Can Do About It. So there's a book, and these are their authors. I'm butchering their name, but I can give you the name of the book. That way you can look up the book. Levers of Power, How the 1% Rules and What the 99% Can Do. Quote, this is another quote from them, that book. The route to real progressive reform goes through the corporations and the state agencies that exercise power over the politicians. When large masses of people stop the money from flowing, that's when the major institutions, especially private ones, start to panic and fold. But this won't naturally occur. Immersion, and economic crises do not inevitably lead people into organizing strikes and occupations and other actions that weaken capital's hold. In fact, as evident in recent polling, people can become politically confused on what to believe. In recent surveys, while many African Americans desire dramatic changes to so-called justice system, a significant number also want the same level or more funding for police. Among Asian Americans and Latin populations in the U.S., there has been a rightward political shift, with others caring less and less about mainstream politics itself. Quote, the strikes and organizing drives that lit up the industrial landscape beginning in 1934 were not spontaneous eruptions, popular folklore notwithstanding. Historian Steve Fraser writes in this book, Men of Prosperity. Quote, in virtually every case, they were prepared for and led by a menagerie of radicals, socialists, communists, Trotskyists, remnants, and of the industrial worker of the world, the Wobblies, anarchists, syndicatists, and others. Sorry for butchering all of that quote. But let's continue. I'm getting tired. Okay, been doing a lot of reading. Anyway, oppressed and exploited people in the United States need a left-wing political party organization independent of the two-party system. And now we're now we're to the asking of the question of not the question, but making the point that there is a gaping hole, lacking left leadership in the United States specifically. But I think that's by design of the FBI, by design of the CIA. When you're killing off these leaders, it's hard to cultivate another one. When you're killing off the Fred Hamptons, it's hard and it's scary to cultivate another one. And when you're doing these things in the background to undermine organizations like Black Lives Matters and or the organizations. So we are lacking leadership. And because of that leadership vacuum, we have the status quo still in place, the professional managerial class and what they think we should be doing, which is going in through the Democratic Party still. So I'm going to reread this part. Oppressed and exploited people in the United States need a left-wing political party independent of the two-party system. We need left-wing groups that are willing to organize strike occupations as well as other effective modes of resistance that would truly help in shifting power from the capitalist elite over to the masses. We need politicized constituencies who recognize the objective need for socialism rather than for some bastardized form of regulated capitalism. And this is the reason why we can't go through the Democratic Party. This is the reason why we can't coalition with the majority reports, with the TYTs. People who have said, I have set my anchor into the Democratic Party and I'm riding with that shit, we have to let them go. We have to stop speaking in terms that we're infighting. We're not. We cannot coalition with people who have hitched their ride to the Democratic Party. That includes Marianne Williamson. You can't do both. Oh, this is what let's combat. Let's debunk this garbage. People always say, "Well, I think we should do everything possible. Put all our boats out there." No, we should not. In the same way, when people say, "Why are we going after Why are we going after two superpowers in China and Russia at the same time?" We're already thinly spread. Same thing, strategy. Strategy wise, if we're trying to accomplish something, no, we can't do electoral politics and do outside actions with the same vigor. We can't. We have limited resources. What needs to flip is we need to flip electoral politics from the taking up 85% of our time, which it does now, to taking up 10% of our time, and now direct action is 90%. That's what needs to happen, and direct action and organizing, I should say. So let's continue. And this also, I should say, speaks to why social democracy will never work, because it's not challenging capital. This is why it's a weird coalition to think you could join a team that doesn't want what you want. It's so bizarre. But anyway, let's continue. The Democratic Party won't allow for this type of organizing to occur. They won't. Especially from within its ranks. The Democratic Party won't allow Bernie Sanders to organize, won't allow AOC to organize. This is why we need new leadership that's not connected whatsoever to the Democratic Party. We need a labor movement not connected to the Democratic Party. Not the labor movement that the Breaking Points talk about, that the Unbossed talks about, not the labor movement that the David Pakmans and the majority reports talk, not that labor movement. The labor movement that only involves the labor movement part that involves the Democratic Party. Because Workers Strike Back and Shama Solange, she reached out to some of them. Heard nothing back. Crickets. Heard nothing back. And Nick has been saying this all the time because he spoke to her. Anyway, let's continue. Quote, You put them first and they put you last. Malcolm X had stated decades ago about the Democrats when they championed themselves as civil rights fighters while wielding the FBI to suppress a burgeoning left wing opposition. You put them first, they put you last. Let's put that quote up by Malcolm X here. You put them first, they put you last. And that's Democratic Party or Republican Party. That's the duopoly. Why we must get people out of this. A failure to develop a constituency of people willing to leverage their power as workers, as tenants, as masses against the GOP, against Democratic leadership, against the corporations that fuel them will always lead us down a path of political impotence and wandering. A failure to develop a constituency of people willing to agitate beyond the bounds of voting booths and public relations with mean policies like Biden's immigration detention policy and the continued financial support for the U.S. military industrial complex, for the police, for the corporatized state shall persist, regardless of whom the people claim to elect and believe in. Regardless of you put in there, all of that is going to continue. So thinking this is why the strategy of we're just gonna no, regardless of what red or blue you put in there, it's going to be the same outcome. Just with different makeup and perfume. This is going to be difficult, and this is why the professional managerial class never really wants to go down this path. They don't want to go. You think they want to go from their weekend trips and lattes to real work? Can you see the Bernie and Sanders industrial complex, the Sam Cedars, the Emma Viglins? Do you really see them out there doing work? Anna Kasparian? Come on. This is going to be difficult work and will require dedication and leadership, but it's either developing true left-wing and socialist power or remain trapped in this loop where elected officials like Biden promise the people some reforms, and in the midst of those promises, more and more people are hurt, left in overcrowded prisons and detention facilities. Spot on last part of the article there. And this is why we push so hard against Marianne Williamson. We can't keep doing this. This is over. This strategy has failed and failed and failed and failed. Let's do a strategy that we know for sure won't fail. So that literally means we could try anything new. Anything new is better than this because we know for sure this will fail. We don't know for sure if a Green Party would fail, if another independent party would fail, if a new party would fail. We don't know that, but we do know going through the Democratic Party will fail, and it fails every time. So stop buying the Marianne Williamson.